Welcome back to the channel where we focus on a wide range of estate planning topics. Today, we're going to dive deep into the role of an executor. An executor is a person who's named in a will to manage the decedent's legal and financial affairs after death. Their role is to carry out the wishes of the decedent as specified within the will and to do so in accordance with state and federal law. So just know, for this video, I'm giving a broad overview through the lenses of Pennsylvania law. The process is similar in each state, but laws and processes vary, so just keep that in mind. So the first thing to point out is that if you have all of your estate planning documents, including your powers of attorney and a will, the powers of attorney cease to have any legal effect once a person dies. At the time of death, the agent under a power of attorney will no longer have legal authorization to act on behalf of the decedent. At death, we look to the will, if there is one, to determine who is named as the executor. And that person is then formally appointed through a court process called probate. If there isn't a will, anyone can file in court asking to be appointed as the administrator. Now, often this is a family member or a loved one, but it can also be a creditor. So if there is a will, the person appointed is called the executor. And if there isn't a will, the person appointed is called an administrator. Both effectively serve the same function. The only meaningful difference is that an executor must carry out the directives under a decedent's will, while an administrator will look to intestacy laws to determine who gets what from the decedent's estate. Intestacy laws are kind of like a statutory will. They outline in order of priority who are the natural heirs of a decedent and what portion of the decedent's estate they should receive. If you're interested in this topic, I'll link below to a video called What Happens If I Die Without a Will. I recorded that several months ago, so if you're interested, check out the link below. Whether there is an executor or an administrator, they're both legally required to administer the decedent's estate in accordance with state and federal law. These laws can be incredibly complex, so very often the executor or the administrator will hire an attorney to guide them through the process. Now, I want to take a moment to mention trusts. In Pennsylvania, where I practice, revocable living trusts are far less common because the probate process is relatively straightforward and cost-effective, and trust administration process has almost identical statutory requirements. So probate and trust administration after someone dies, broadly speaking, are very similar in Pennsylvania. So for the rest of this video, I'm going to refer to this person as an executor, but just know that the role of an administrator or even a trustee of a revocable living trust are almost identical. Let's talk about some of the specific duties and responsibilities of the executor. The executor's role, or a big piece of it, is to marshal the asset. This means collect all of the assets in the estate and bring them together into one place. Often this is through the use of an estate account. So an estate account is set up, any money coming into the estate is deposited into that account, and any debt that's paid or any bills that are paid out of that account. So this process often includes contacting various banks and financial institutions and working with them to liquidate the accounts and to obtain statements for accounting purposes. And then once the estate account is open, often with the attorney's help, all bills that are coming in are paid. So these could include medical bills, credit card bills, cable, internet, really anything that hasn't been paid before the decedent dies. It is critical to keep accurate records. So often the attorney will require that he or she maintain control of the estate account checkbook because they'll need to do all the accounting for the estate, and they want to make sure that record keeping is done properly for the most efficient administration of the estate. If there's real estate, the executor has to decide what to do with it and what to do with its contents. Now, a lot of this will depend on what the will says. If there are any hard to value assets that pass to specific beneficiaries or that are just contained within the estate and go to residuary beneficiaries, either way, the executor may need to arrange for appraisals for valuation purposes, including payment of inheritance and estate tax. There are a lot of key tasks during the estate administration process that are often more actively managed by the attorney, but the executor should know that these tasks are being done. So this includes things like preparing the petition for probate and arranging for the executor to be sworn in. It includes providing legal notice to beneficiaries and the natural heirs that the decedent has died, and that those folks may have certain rights with respect to the estate. It includes advertising the estate. Often this is done through a local newspaper or a legal journal. And the reason that you do that is to create a statute of limitations for claims against the estate. It includes other notices to various state and federal agencies, including TransUnion, to avoid identity theft. In Pennsylvania, we notify the Pennsylvania Department of Human Services to determine whether there were any reimbursable expenses that were paid by Medicaid that need to be paid back. We have to notify PennDOT and give notice to the VA if the decedent was a veteran. Also, there are several tax returns that may need to be filed, including the decedent's final year income tax return. Often that's done by the decedent's tax preparer if they had one. If not, the attorney can help find someone to prepare that. We have to file a Pennsylvania inheritance tax return, potentially a fiduciary income tax return or an estate income tax return to report any income that's coming into the estate. And although it would be very unlikely with current exemptions, potentially a Form 706 federal estate tax return. The attorney should also be focused on post-mortem tax planning. There are various deductions, exemptions, and exclusions that can reduce the amount of tax that's paid, and the attorney should be identifying those opportunities and acting on them. The Pennsylvania inheritance tax return is due 9 months after the date of death, so once the return is filed, it needs to be reviewed and approved by the Pennsylvania Department of Revenue, which can take several months. So in many cases, estate administration can take, on average, a year to 15 months. This video is meant to be a broad overview of the executor's function in estate administration. And this leads us to a few closing remarks to the executor. Almost invariably, something comes up in the estate administration process that is frustrating and aggravating. This could be dealing with a difficult bank or financial institution. It could be dealing with governmental agencies. It could be dealing with difficult family members or other beneficiaries. The list goes on. And as the executor, you should be prepared for this. The attorney should be working with you to offload the stress and overwhelm as much as possible. A good attorney and his or her staff understand that you've just lost a loved one, and that is hard enough. The role of an executor is not easy. It takes thought, it takes time, it takes planning, it takes responsibility, and it takes patience. Often, the executor is entitled to a fee for their services that were performed on behalf of the estate. And that's a decision that some executors aren't sure about. As you can tell, there's a lot that goes into the estate administration. So generally speaking, it is very well earned. A lot of people are frustrated by the process, how complicated it is, and how long it takes, and I understand that frustration. And I often remind people that our lives are unbelievably complicated. We own cars, we own houses, we own things, we have bills to pay, we have retirement accounts, we have brokerage accounts and life insurance policies and annuities and all kinds of financial instruments, and we have a system of medical benefits, and we have a system for taxation, and we have a legal system. And estate administration is a process of unwinding all of that after a person has died. If you have been named as an executor, I would highly recommend that you hire a reputable estate attorney whose team should be walking you through every step of the process and taking on most of the heavy lifting and making the process as easy as possible. It will get tough at times, but having the right team working for you is invaluable. I hope that you found this video helpful. If you did, please let me know, and I will look forward to seeing you in the next episode.